Hi, this is Ed Rushman for Whitestone Journal. I think of strange things when I'm driving sometimes, and I thought, what if Jesus hadn't died on the cross? What if he had lived longer? I guess I think about that partly because of being older myself, and thinking about, we're supposed to live like Jesus, and I don't have an example of him at my age. A lot of people could say that, because the tradition is that he died at 33. Anyway, but as I was thinking about that, the first thing I thought of was, okay, under what conditions could he have stayed with us? The only conditions would have been if people had accepted the message, the good news, and changed their lives, because the way that we have chosen to live is directly in opposition to what God's intention is. We've decided to live with not like healthy competition, but bad competition. We have major issues with pride that makes us have to prove things to other people, often at the other person's expense. The acquisition of extreme wealth, which most of us don't really have to deal with, but the petty ways that we do it, the ways that we have to one-up somebody else. I'm sorry, but I think of women with the whole makeup and clothes thing, that they compete with the others, and through this appearance war, this beauty war, they have to, in a sense, pressure everybody else to spend more time, spend more money, and it's really just to satisfy their own ego. For guys with cars and maybe working out and some of the stuff with trying to, not just impress other men, but be bigger, stronger, faster, and richer. Even for guys that don't make a lot of money, there's a lot of competition sometimes. Oh my goodness, I remember some of the stuff at work with people competing over how much space they had in their office cube, for crying out loud, and getting upset over things like that. And really it all came down to pride. But I digress. Jesus would have continued to preach the gospel. He would have continued to heal, to be the presence of God in the world in a new way. And okay, this is a little influenced by a movie I saw recently, but I'll deal with that later. But anyway, in the movie there was somebody that at some point is able to do really wonderful things, and they want to understand that and everything. And he says, the point to my life is that this is what other people could be. This is what everyone could be. That's the point. I mean, when we look at Jesus, we realize that this is what we could be like. He couldn't keep doing that and not get a reaction. And there were really only two possibilities for the world. Either the world had to persist, not everybody, but enough people had to stick to the old way and be offended by him and eventually kill him. Or the entire world had to convert. The entire world had to change their heart and embrace love. And there was the Roman Empire. There were the local religious authorities that certainly weren't pleased. But even if they had turned around, the Roman authorities, that's just hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that world changing the way it needed to. And the world that we have now is so much more invested in evil. It's so much more invested in pride. And it's so much more complicated. We've set up so much now, like we don't want to return, we don't want to go to God, we don't want to be good, and we've set up a complicated, difficult world to live in a sense almost burning our bridges so that we can't go to God. Because now we have all these reasons. Well, what would happen to the economy if we all started being really good? And I don't want to give up my my fancy stuff. I don't want to give up this. I don't want to give up all these things that I've acquired. There's so much that we've set up. We've made ourselves a world that almost doesn't operate without sin. Sin is an integral part of all of our institutions now, including the church. Even for the things that the church does, occasionally this comes up that, the Vatican takes a lot of money to operate. I mean, it's not anything compared to most of the human institutions that are out there. The universities, the entertainment, governments, recreation businesses. I mean, there's so much that's just so much bigger. The Vatican's nothing by comparison. But, they've got to do investments and stuff, and there's still, and more than that, there's people that have power, even in the church, and they don't want to give it up. I mean, I'm not saying this to criticize the church. It's that we are all made of the same stuff. My goodness, it would have been easier for the Roman Empire to have converted. And yes, I know eventually they stopped, the Edict of Milan and all that. But it would have been easier for the Roman Empire to have converted than for the world to convert today. And yet, it's still possible if we wanted enough. So, kind of funny. Either the world had to accept the gospel and live it, or Jesus had to die. And the same thing is true for us. Ultimately, we have two choices. We either embrace the gospel and desire the love of God and to live in love, or we desire to reject love and say it doesn't exist. No one really loves. Everybody becomes cynical and says, there's really no such thing as selfless love. And what's the point? So I'm going to get mine. There's no God. There's no real love. There's no goodness. So I'm going to get everything I can out of life in the short time that I'm here. And everybody suffers because of that. That isn't a way that makes the world work well. It just puts us back into that unhealthy competition and means that people are just crawling all over each other to get a little higher, even though they know the game has an end. And I don't know. It's something to think about. Ultimately, Jesus died because we won't change. Yeah, the world wouldn't change, but even on an individual basis, we're just like the world, and the world is like us. I think of Mandelbrot sets and some of the mathematical stuff where there's small patterns that get repeated, and when they get repeated, they make the same shapes and patterns in the large sense as they do in the small. Don't get too critical with me on the math because I'm not good at it, okay? Yeah, I did some programming of that back in the day. That was a fun thing to do. But the point is that all of humanity is like one person. And one person, in a sense, tells the whole story of humanity. People get killed, and we may not kill, but the things that drive people to kill are in all of us. Some control it better than others. Some give themselves to love better than others. Other people push love away. That's the way life is. I wish it was better. Jesus had to die because we refused and continue to refuse to change. We didn't let him live longer. We didn't want God living with us because it made us feel bad. Anyway, I'm Ed Rushman for Whitestone Journal.